Let's try that again. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. Today we're going to be looking at the art of Pablo Picasso, and specifically this portrait he did of his muse, mistress, girlfriend at the time, Dora Maar, who was a great artist in and of herself, and really probably one of the most powerful women that he had spent any time with, that he was fortunate enough to spend any time with, and maybe the one woman or figure besides maybe Georges Braque or Henri Matisse who was his sort of intellectual and creative equal. And this painting was done just shortly after having completed Guernica, his really monumental painting, which we painted just the other day. This way. All right, we did this fella just the other day. So she was the one who actually took the photographs that documented this process, and yeah. So anyway, let's get right into the painting here. Let's take a look at the plan for today. What we're going to do is we're going to get the image on the canvas. We're going to stain the canvas. That's the Imprimatura. We'll talk briefly about Picasso's biography because we've done a number of episodes on him already, even just last week. So we'll probably mostly spend the time painting today. We'll do a little, I don't even think we'll do underpaint. We'll just go right to the background and start working on that. Okay, so let's look at actually, you know what? Just as a quick reminder to hit the notification bell if you're new to the channel. Subscribe. Hit the like button. Hit that like button. Yes, there's always something there. Those are the three things. And then take a photograph of the artwork that you've made and upload it to the Facebook group so that we can share in the glory of your creation. There's also, if you want to support the group, there's the PayPal link, there's the super chat function. You can contact me through the Facebook group or the... Gotcha. Or you can contact me through my website. All those links are in the description below. Okay, so let's get the image onto the canvas. And I've already done this, so I'm just going to play this video and we'll talk as it unfolds here. So the outline, which you can download from the Dropbox folder, I'll show you where that is immediately after we're done this. You can download it for free. You don't have to pay anything. Just print it out. And I use my inkjet printer here at home. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Regular photocopy paper. And I'm putting it on a 9x12 sized canvas board. And you can get these exact ones that I'm using from Amazon. There's a link in the description below, or you can also order the, or your dollar store will have them. They're not quite as, the ones that I'm using are better than the dollar store ones for twice the price, but that makes them $2 instead of $1, and much better than those, because the cheap ones tend to warp very easily as soon as you get any water on them whatsoever. Okay, so now I'm using some carbon paper, and I'm putting that carbon paper underneath. And you want the shiny side down, so that's the side that has the carbon or graphite that's going to come off onto the canvas. And then I'm just going to use a ruler to do some of this initial stuff, and I'm going to zoom through here because we don't need to watch every little, this whole process can take some time, right? I didn't do all of the lines. Like, so for instance, you could see there was a lot of lines, these curving lines in the interior of her torso, and all those circular dots. I didn't even bother doing those because we're just going to kind of, we'll do those when we get there, right? Anything missing? Nope, looks like we're ready to go. And so, when you're all done, you are going to have your canvas prepped, right? I like to keep this just off out of the way here. And now we've got our canvas with a little bit of the image on it. Next step here is what we call the Imprimatura. The Imprimatura is the Italian word for priming layer. So we want to prime this canvas with some kind of color, and you can, traditionally artists will use a warm brown, rusty, reddish color. I'm going to use what I normally do, which is my warm yellow. Now, if you're new to the channel and you're like, what is a warm yellow? I've kind of heard somebody talk about that before, but I don't know what that means. Well, here's the actual colors that I'm going to use to do this entire painting. I am going to use this Azo Yellow Deep as my warm yellow to apply over top for my Imprimatura. And then I'm going to use 7 other colors here. You notice there's 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues. I've got a white and a black at the bottom. I almost never use the black. I'll have that black until the day I die, right? Because we can make our own black, as we will in today's painting. So if you don't have Amsterdam paint, and I'm not sponsored or paid by anyone, I bought all these supplies with my own money. You can use golden. This is maybe a higher quality. It certainly is a higher quality paint, but 3 times the price. Liquitex. They have a student grade and a professional grade. This is their student grade. Winsor and Newton. Artist Loft from Michael's Art Supply chain. Buzz. Whoa. Peebo. Holbein. And Daler-Rowney. So lots of different paint brands. They all have very similar colors that you can use to do exactly what we're about to do here. Okay, so let's get some of this aforementioned warm yellow on the palette. I'd be very interested to know in the chat who's watching, as well as if you're planning on making today's painting or not. If you've got something else you're thinking of doing. Now, this is the only time I ever use warm yellow when I'm painting with acrylic. Or sorry, this is the only time I ever use water when I'm painting with acrylic, because ideally you want to use medium, like matte medium or glazing fluid or some kind of gel in your paint instead of water, because just think, we clean our brushes, we clean the acrylic paint off our clothes and brushes and hands with water. So it just makes the painting less stable the more water you put in there. It works at this point because we're painting onto the gesso. So this white, you know, when you get a canvas from the art store or dollar store or wherever you're getting it from, and it looks white like this, it has been gessoed, right? Because canvas itself, you know, it has kind of a tan color, and the gesso stabilizes the surface so that it doesn't contract or expand too much. It might do a little bit, but it doesn't expand or contract with the weather or humidity, temperature changes, etc. So that's very important. It is also, it helps things stick to the canvas, and it also provides that nice white background color. It absorbs this first layer of paint really well, and it helps fill in the weave of the canvas so we can get a smoother and smoother surface. And the smoother your surface is, the easier it is to paint. Okay. Paula says, yes, I'm working on the outline. So many lines. Thanks, Michael. So again, you don't have to do all the lines. I didn't do all the lines in mine either, so. Clean our brush off. Okay. So I think I'm just going to hit this with the blow dryer really quickly before we move on to the next step here. Okay, now we've got our canvas ready to go, and it's still a little bit wet. So let's just talk a little bit about this particular painting, Picasso and Dora Maar. So, I just remembered, I forgot to mention that the Dropbox folder, if you click on the link to download the template, I think we're in folder 123 here. Folder 123, Dora Maar, and those are the files, right? One's a JPEG and one's a PDF outline, whatever is more convenient for you. And then, of course, here's the Facebook group, which I strongly encourage you to join. Okay, so as I said, we've talked kind of maybe ad nauseum about Picasso and his biography. 1881 to 1973, lived a long life. You know, I think a lot of people aren't even aware that he lived until like the early 70s. I think when people think of Picasso, they think of, you know, the 1920s and 1930s perhaps, but don't realize he was still alive and working all the way up until the day he died through the 1960s, etc. Today's painting takes place when he was in his late 50s, and really at the zenith of his career. You know, Picasso is one of those guys that kept having these comebacks. Just when everybody thought he was old and done with and out to pasture, he comes roaring back. And the painting that sort of helped to re-cement his legacy is Guernica, that we talked about just a couple days ago when we painted Guernica, right? I also just, again, I think it's also just important, since, you know, we're talking about Picasso, that he is a very controversial figure, especially, you know, if Picasso had been alive today, he would definitely be one of the people who would have been quote-unquote canceled. Like, he's a notorious textbook misogynist, really a terrible human being to the people who were closest to him, especially the women in his life, who he famously said are either, what was the exact quote? Goddesses or doormats. So and when he was finished with a woman in his life, he would sort of just kick them out completely, have nothing to do with them anymore, and often they would also coincide with maybe a different change in his style. And when he was looking back at his life, he said there was 7 phases in my life and 7 women in my life. And I'm sure there were way more than 7 women, but those are the 7 that, you know, were fell into his whirlpool, as you might say, including today's artist Dora Maar. So where should we focus our time on? I mean, I think maybe just briefly we can talk about the relationship between this painting and Cubism, because Cubism was the movement that Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque created together. Braque is often forgotten as one of the great innovators of culture, and especially early 20th century art, because the two of them in conjunction came up with Cubism. And Cubism at its origin was an attempt to show multiple viewpoints simultaneously on a flat surface, to almost have the experience of looking at a sculpture of which you can look around and up and down and underneath and all that stuff. Could we have that same type of experience on a canvas? And that sounds absurd and impossible, but that's sort of what they were trying to do, was trying to wrestle with that question. And another way to think about it would be to like take a cardboard box and then unfold it flat onto a table. So now when it's unfolded flat, we can see the top and bottom and all the sides because it's been unfolded. So Cubism is kind of takes that idea, but instead of unfolding a cardboard box and flattening it onto the table, it's taking someone like a human being, a face, a guitar, a landscape, and unfolding it and flattening it onto a table. You know, it takes, I mean, mentally it's quite a leap, but you have to think about how, you know, by the late 1800s, photography had overtaken most of the traditional roles that painters once had. Photographers at one point, you know, are painters for centuries and centuries, millennia. Their role was to document important events in human history, and suddenly photographers can set up a camera and boom, a flashbulb goes off, and boom, you've got a picture of Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address. Whereas a painter would be just finished frantically doing the sketch, let alone the painting, in that same period of time. And depending on how you want to think about it, photography can be more accurate to that moment and capture maybe things that we can't see because they're happening too fast. Some other people would say, well, photography also lies. Photography also is a form of abstraction, because a photographer isn't just some innocent, naive person without any agenda whatsoever. A photograph can be composed and arranged. Photographs can be manipulated, and things can be erased or added to them. So we always want to think, especially now with like digital tools, computers, we can basically create images out of nowhere that look like reality. And if you think that's crazy, look at some of the most recent developments in artificial intelligence, where there's now computers where you can type in a set of words, and those words will, like, you could say, I want to see a green bus in a blue forest that has space aliens getting out of it. And the technology is now there where you could type that in a computer and you will instantly, within like a 100 millionth of a second, get virtually unlimited images that meet exactly that parameter. And some of them will look more, if you want it to be abstract or you want it to be photorealistic, the computer will spit that out. That is crazy, but it's happening right now. I think one of the groups doing that it's called DALL-E. I think a play on WALL-E, the Pixar animated movie. DALL-E, I think it's DALL-E. Google it, it'll blow your mind. But anyway, if we get back to Cubism, as soon as artists realized, well, photographers can do what we do faster, what are we going to do? Maybe we have to create things that photography cannot capture. These infinite perspectives. This image we're seeing here, which we are going to be painting next month, by the way, this is considered to be one of the very, very first Cubist paintings. This is Picasso's famous Les Damoiselles d'Avignon, or the Ladies of Avignon. And we see various different sort of experiments with abstraction here. And actually some of these early images are very directly inspired, or you may even say culturally appropriated, from African masks that Picasso saw on display in Paris at the World's Exhibition. And those African masks sort of were instantly very popular with this young group of artists. Picasso, in fact, stole some of these masks that were on display in the Louvre right around the time the Mona Lisa was stolen, and Picasso was rounded up as a possible, as the possible thief for the theft of the Mona Lisa, which is a whole other story. And this whole story is told very well in a book called, by Norman Mailer, Portrait of Picasso as a Young Man. Great book. I think probably the best Norman Mailer book that I've read. And it's hilarious. It's a page turner, but it just shows like Picasso running around Paris with a bag full of priceless artifacts, terrified that the police are going to bust in his door because the Mona Lisa has been stolen and everyone, is searching for it, and he doesn't want to get caught with any sort of evidence tying him in any way to any theft. They dump them into the Seine River, and unfortunately some of those priceless artifacts have never been recovered. But that's a whole other story. But what we see on the screen there is these experiments with cubism. You can see these costumes that he was designing. There was a rise in a particular type of art that later becomes, well, it originally is Dada art, which is this absurd kind of silly art that is really quite inspired by what's going on in, inspired by the horrors of World War I, and many artists, after having actually experienced the life in the trenches, left World War I saying, like, how do you make art after that, out of this horrible, horrific situation, and there's a lot of artists who are like, the only thing you can do is just laugh. You can just ridicule society, because society has literally gone insane. And that is happening simultaneous to Cubism. And we talked at the kind of early 1920s, Picasso sort of leaves Cubism, and he experiments with neoclassical art after a trip to Florence, Italy. And then he marries, after he gets back in 1919, he marries Marie Therese, and together they have a child, and they stay together for I think for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, Picasso was not the monogamous type, and Picasso takes up with an artist named Dora Maar. And Dora Maar was a very successful photographer, poet, writer, and later abstract painter. And I think Picasso was attracted to her strength, her intelligence. She was a very smart woman, had traveled widely. And whereas I think some of the other women that Picasso had met were much younger. I mean, she was, I think, 26, I think, at the time that they had met. But some of the other women that Picasso had pulled into his orbit were in their teens, very early 20s, if that, right? So this is maybe the first, and at the time Picasso meets Dora Maar, she's like, I think maybe it says in here somewhere, I know he was, I think, 55 years old. Let me just see if I can find this. I'm sure it says in here, but she was, basically half his age, and okay, so to kind of go back to some of the negative aspects of Picasso here, is one of the most perverse things that he does do is he literally pits his wife, Marie Therese, against Dora Maar, and almost like a Roman emperor has them fight over him, like literally rolling around on the ground, pulling at each other's hair over Picasso, which is like, you know, it reminds me of a scene right out of that Quentin Tarantino film, Django Unchained, where Leonardo DiCaprio has these two enslaved men fight to the death in his at his dinner table while he has guests over, just for fun, right? And so, which is just incredibly perverse and horrible and disgusting. And you know, so I think it's really important for us to recognize that aspect of Picasso's life, because it is very, very troubling, and it's one of the reasons why I resisted doing any Picasso work for over a year as part of this series, until I felt like that was the big elephant in the room, and we have to talk about Picasso when we're talking about modern art. And if we can look at his paintings, we can still learn. He was an incredible painter, not a great guy, but a great painter. We can learn from his painting technique and also have important conversations about relationships and what not to do, and how we can be better people in our own lives, right? Okay. What else can I say here? Oh, I think it's okay. So this painting was the second most expensive painting ever sold when it was purchased in 2006 by the former Georgian Prime Minister, the country Georgia, which is very close to Ukraine and also next to Russia. It was purchased by Georgian oligarch, billionaire, Bidzina Ivanishvili. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And who this is what he looks like. This is the owner of this painting, which sold for over, I think, $120 million. As I said, it was the second most expensive painting ever sold at the time. Now it is the 30th most expensive painting of all time. So just over the past, a little over 15 years, there has been 29 other paintings that have sold for more than this painting, which is just sort of remarkable how much money has been flowing in and out of the art market here. Okay, I think let's just get right to the painting itself, and let's talk. Let's start making this painting. So often I usually start with a little bit of outlining, but I think here we can just go right into it. Picasso in this painting is kind of heavy-handed with his paint. So you can see here there's quite a lot of texture. So one of the things we can do is just start building up some of that texture, painting directly in it. Now, a lot of this looks here as under layers, like layers of paint that he painted over top of. There were other images or other things that he put that were there. One of the things I think with Picasso that is a great lesson for us to learn about is that he wasn't someone that would fiddle around and he would just continue painting, and if he didn't like it, he would just paint over it again in a fairly aggressive manner. And some people would consider this quite upsetting to see that level of texture from prior layers there. Picasso embraced it, and it kind of becomes an iconic feature of his artwork that he sort of shows us his process. He shows us some evidence of earlier decisions. And I think I've talked about this before. It's almost as if he does it deliberately so that he can build up those surfaces to make it look maybe even more complex than it actually is. So he might have a pretty, I mean, I have no idea what he was thinking, but it's possible he had a pretty clear idea what he wanted to do, but decided, you know what, I'm just going to put a bunch of little blobs underneath here, and it's going to look like there's all sorts of other work here that I painted out. I see in the comments there, Donna says, Michael, isn't it true that a lot of men artists were not very nice in those days? That's true. I mean, you could probably say that about Western culture in general. If we look at stories of men from not just the art realm, but music and business. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who would like to return to the past because they think the past was really, really great. I don't know. I think we've come a long way in terms of relationships between men and women, and even people who don't even fall or within that binary worldview, right? People who are two-spirited or who are trans, etc. Like those people had zero rights. Like, I mean, I was just thinking the other day, like when I was growing up, there were still discussions about should people who are trans or gay have human rights. Like, is it okay if someone beats up and kills a lesbian or a trans person? And really, since I've been alive, those laws have been changed, thank goodness. But, you know, so that's happened over the past 40 years, let alone the past 100+ years when Picasso was much younger. Yeah, so things have changed. I think there's still lots more that we can do. And again, part of what doing these episodes or just talking about these things just helps us remember that we're still on a journey together, right? All the work has not yet been done. Heidi points out that cat is so cute. And it's interesting because Picasso has included this cat because one of his, I guess, pet names for Dora Maar, the woman who's the subject of today's painting, was he would refer to her as an Afghan cat, as in a fairly derogatory way, because he was using that term to refer to to sort of like wild, uncontrollable woman who's had a temper and would not acquiesce to his every whim and demand, right? Like, oh, I mean, you know, as every proper woman should, just do whatever Picasso wanted. God forbid they had their own thoughts and feelings, right? So one of the scholars sort of believe that this cat here is Picasso sort of introducing this symbol that sort of reflects her personality here. Also, just before we go into this, I should also just mention too that this is often when Picasso was painting paintings of Dora Maar, he was painting her as like this very sad, crying woman, which did not make her happy. That was something that she found a little bit offensive, and she also did not sit very often for Picasso. One of Picasso's sons made the comment that he only actually sat and posed for Picasso, I think, twice in his entire life. Most of the times Picasso would either work from photographs or from memory. So, and then he might, you know, at the dinner table look, oh, that's interesting. I like that hat. I'm just going to paint that hat onto your face later on. So sometimes these figures are not particularly specific. They might just be kind of figments from his imagination. But the fact that he painted her as this sort of crying victim of a person, Dora Maar herself wrote and talked about that being, that she sort of had to, she felt like Picasso was trying to control her identity, and would not allow her to be a happy, positive person in his artwork. And so this is actually one of the few paintings of Dora Maar where she appears to be smiling, and yet, you know, the way that her hands have almost like this claw-like kind of quality, you know, might make her, you know, she kind of, this hat too looks a little bit vaguely witch-like, you know. So there's a lot going on here. Picasso, you know, like Salvador Dali, really sort of put everything out there, and if you want to go in and psychoanalyze the paintings, they are there for your for you to decode or analyze. Okay, so anyway, let's kind of go back here, because I just sort of bled into this. Okay, so let's mix some paint, and we're going to start painting this painting here. Okay. Oh, let's get some of these tabs on here. Literally 2 minutes before we went on the air here, I was finishing up another painting for next week, because we're going away for a little family reunion. And instead of just not doing anything, I've got a couple of videos that will go live while we're away, so you could still keep your regular schedule, and I'll just be commenting in the chat during those streams. So I'll give you just a little quick tease, those of you who are watching. This is Vincent van Gogh's Irises. I like how that turned out. Pretty cool, hey? Anyway, you'll have to watch the stream on Tuesday of next week to see how that one was done. So we'll get all of our paint on here. This is a very colorful painting, so I'm expecting we'll use most of these colors. I have noticed that the cool red seems to be one of the colors I use the least these days. Well, I don't know how long that lasts. I mean, there's definitely some times where that's one of the only colors I use. So maybe it's just one of those weird quirks that over the selection of paintings we've been doing just hasn't featured that many paintings that require it. But when you're doing so many paintings like this, you start to notice these little trends happening. You're like, huh, what is that about? Oh, our daughter seems to be having a tough time up there. Yesterday, my daughter and I spent 5 hours at the children's hospital because she was bitten by a bee earlier in the week, and her thumb swelled up. So that was, turns out, no problem whatsoever. Just the third day after a bee sting is the worst day for swelling, and then everything gets better. So we just happened to be on the worst day, and we got to spend a little time bonding at the hospital. That's fun, right? Okay. So our background here, basically what I'm going to do is paint in this kind of eggshell white. We'll probably also get some of the chair done as well. So to get this eggshell color, obviously we're going to use lots of white. Come on. We're going to make let's make a cool gray. So maybe we don't need much, well, or yeah, cool brown, sorry. Let's take our cool yellow, our cool blue. So we get this nice greenish color. And let's take our cool red. You can see, I mean, basically we just made a gray there, right? Very, very dark. But if we take more red and mix it into here, we'll get more of a brownish color. We need a little bit more blue. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to put some of this right there. And come on. Just going to clean this brush, and we'll just go right to a bigger brush. Okay, so let's take our white. So that looks a little bit gray. Let's put a bit of yellow and red in there. Now it's a little bit too dark, so we'll add more white, and then we're going to add some glazing fluid, which is also going to thin it out. And so the yellow of the canvas that's already there will make this look a little bit lighter and maybe a little bit more brown. Okay, so paint a lot of this in with this color. This almost looks like I might have gone a little, it's still a little bit on the darker side, not quite as white as I was wanting it to be. We can still lighten it up if we like. Kind of nice, this color, though. Yeah, it's definitely darker. We'll let it dry, and then I'll maybe add a little bit of white back over top of it. Let's just get the rest of this, however. This is also a large painting, right? This is over a meter tall, about actually a meter and a quarter high, which is, what, about 3 feet tall. So one of his larger portraits. Because generally, traditionally portraits, unless they're a full body portrait, are usually, almost life size. Whereas this one is larger than life, I guess you could say. Okay, did I get everything in there? So let's just, I'm going to take a little bit of my cool blue, and let's just take a bit of that and mix this in here. And paint with the cool blue. Again, we got a few different blues here. Got my hand on that canvas and left a little splotch there. Remember, all of this is still just kind of our beginning part of the painting. Okay, so that's good. Let's what should we do next? I do want to, maybe before I go too far, I will do a little bit more work on the white there, but we'll wait for that to dry. I think the next thing I'll do is, let's just do the chair and the floor. So we're actually going to put some warmer colors down here. So this time we're going to mix a warm brown. So we'll take some warm red, warm yellow, maybe a bit more yellow, and a bit of warm blue. And this gives us a warm brown. Just a bit more yellow. in here, and maybe let's so this isn't the exact right color either, but oh, it looks like I need to put some more white there. So I just realized maybe there's a little bit of blue that should go in there, but we can paint that over top later on. No problem. No problems. So this will make it very easy to darken all of those things because now they're established. And when we darken it, with the black, it'll be kind of like a dark brown because there's brown underneath. Okay, I'm sure there's a little bit of brown here I'm missing somewhere. That looks not bad. So this here, let's just add a bit more yellow into this brown. Paula says, equipped with a tube of Afterbite for the summer. Parents' job is 24/7. Yeah, taking care of the mosquitoes are coming out. It's summer. Okay, making good progress. How about this gray down here? Let's take, let's just use this color we have here. See if we can make a reasonable gray. Actually, that's kind of cool. It's a little bit of a cooler purpley gray. But I don't mind it. It's kind of got its own little vibe to it, and always up for that. So I'm going to make this all this gray. Okay, do we need more gray anywhere else? Just gonna touch up that brown. Okay, so how about let's blow dry this, and then maybe we'll do just a little bit lightening up in the background here. Donna says, my dog likes to eat bees. Good thing he's not allergic. I keep telling her they're spicy, but he doesn't seem to care. Which doesn't seem to care. It's spicy. That's pretty funny. I like that. Okay, let's do... I'm going to take the same color that we painted for the background. Just going to move it over here. Let's get a lot more white in. medium. So this should look different. Whoa, is that too much white? Maybe, what if we wipe a bit of it away? Let's find a clean part of this rag. And maybe I'll just use that white as it is in some of the whitest areas. I think what's interesting is you could see that Picasso made some changes here. Like he's painted this white, might have been actually one of the final things that he painted on this painting, where he clearly felt like maybe it was a little bit too dark, and so he's lightened it up significantly. I'm going to take the color that was there before with just the brush I have right now and kind of paint over this, which is going to lead to a bit of an uneven color, but I like that. So it remains to be seen, but one of the things that's kind of nice is it looks now like we've kind of been wrestling a little bit with these colors. and it gives it that trademark Picasso look of lots of work underneath, like the layers are bubbling up from below. And you know what? I think I'm going to take this same color and quickly go over her face as well now. I'm gonna do her hands as well. Even though there's lots of different colors here. Forgot this little bit of white. There's Derek in the chat. Derek says, thank you for your instruction and inspiration. This is Derek from Tennessee. Hi, Derek. How you doing? Good to have you joining us. Okay. Tennessee. That's one I've been to Texas, I've been to Florida, but I've always wanted to go down. Go to Nashville. That would I really would love to go see a hockey game in Nashville. That's which I know it sounds kind of crazy, but Nashville Predators hockey is said to be one of the most exciting rinks to go see a hockey game. The fans have all sorts of wild chants that you don't normally hear in a hockey game. So yeah, that's on my bucket list. So let's go on. What should we, let's actually go to another step here so that we keep this clear. Okay, so we've got the background established, and we've even done just a little bit in the foreground. Let's now do a lot more. We'll get the basics of the foreground done. We'll go in, finish the background, and then we'll finish the foreground, right? So here's where we are. And oops, come on, let's show that. What should we do first? This is almost, there's going to be a lot of green. Basically green and red is what we're going to be using. I guess a little bit of purple too. Doesn't matter what we do first, so let's do red first. We're going to use warm red right out of the tube. And let's put this right here. Maybe I didn't need to take so much at once. So we could paint this all red and then do little paint black around it, but that just would take so much longer. So we'll keep this. I'm always looking for what is the fastest way to do things. Time is money. So I'm painting these lines right here because later on I'm just going to paint the purple and just go right over top and hide, clean those lines up, just like I did down here as well. I guess it's a little bit more of an orange, but that's okay. I think that's good. There is obviously more red up there, but those are little just kind of outlines. We can do all that later. Maybe we should do this a little bit here, though. This is kind of purpley too, right? Oh, that gray. Forgot that. Let's just do that right now before that paint is no longer it's still a little bit wet. Let's do a green next. We've got our cool blue and our cool yellow. We'll make it primarily a yellowy green. That's pretty intense, so we're going to add white to it. And just tint that color and take some of the kind of emeraldy quality out of it. So we have two different greens here. Oops, that's a purple. And that's still, I could probably have added more yellow and white into this green. So it'll be a little bit different, unless I want to just fix it, but it's not really something that upsets me personally. This is actually, these colors just right here, an odd pairing of colors, but they're working really nicely together. I mean, that's the other thing. Picasso was an incredible colorist. Picasso is often compared in this sort of dynamic with Henri Matisse, and Matisse is often described as like the master of color, and Picasso as the master of line. But Picasso is obviously an incredible colorist. Really knew how to select really nice, bold colors. Let's now mix this purple. We'll take some of our cool red and our warm blue, mix those together. And the more blue we put into it, the more blue purple we have, the more cool red, we put in, the more cool purple, more magenta that purple will be. I think that's pretty good. I'm actually going to add just a little bit of white in here, especially against the background. What do I because this purple, without any white whatsoever, when it goes onto the over top of red or the yellow, it gets really, really dark. Which can be a good thing if you want it to be like that, but if you don't want it to be like that, it can be quite frustrating. Because you've got this beautiful color on your brush and your palette, and then you paint it and it just goes bop. Disappears. Oh, this is a purple. I thought this was a brown. Paint that purple over the brown and it works just perfectly. Okay, is that all the purple? Got a lot of black in here. I mean, technically, we could probably paint that purple and just let it get darker. Yeah, let's put I should put some of this purple with less and less white as we go here. I'm just going to paint this. This is going to go black later. There's a few things. It looks like this gray. I want to put that, mix this gray again. Maybe a bit more on the white side. I'm going to paint this into her hair. I know this cat's gonna go black, but I might as well just okay, let's get the other green in here, which is our warm green. We'll take some warm yellow and warm blue. Gives us this grassy green. We can take this grassy green and Now, I'll probably be doing some outlining with Posca pens later. So that's why I'm not too concerned about being really perfect with my application of paint here. Oh. Probably could do another coat of that same green. Okay, let's get some of this blue and some of our dark color. It's a bit of both of these. Still too dark. That hair, I didn't like it being kind of gray like that, so I painted it. Okay. I'm going to paint those areas down there a brown. Okay. So now, you know, this is, I would say this, we're like halfway through the painting. We've got all of the most important stuff established, all the basic colors. In many places, all that's left to do is just some outlining. My goodness. Daughter's having a terrible time. Let's get some more white on here. Okay, so I'm going to blow dry this here. Oops. So it took me a while to mix it, but this is, you know, I got a bit of, it's almost a slightly greenish quality. I think it's super subtle. Like I don't really see it showing up on camera much, but okay. So, actually, maybe. I don't think I've done the. This is. I probably should have said that before I started doing this, but I'm now just doing like the second pass on the background. And we're making really good time. I'm really excited with where I am at this particular stage. So, I just added that little bit kind of slightly greenish eggshell color. I guess I could do, well, I could do a bit of it up here. It does give this painting a kind of like, makes her look a little bit witchy. Those colors, a strange combination. Now I think I'm gonna make this blue back here a little bit more electric. I'm gonna take some white and cold blue. You know, the color I had there that I'm painting over right now, I think was fine. But, you know, in looking at it, I was like, you know what? Wouldn't it be cool if we just... I love saturated colors, as you may know. And it's, you know, like, why not? Like, this is my painting. I get to do whatever I want with it. I want a big, intense blue there, like that. See, I like that. I'm going to keep that. I mean, unless later on I realize it was maybe a little bit too much, but... Okay. I think I want to now just go with some white and like just really bright white, and the little areas that need pure white, let's get those in place. Okay, Paul says, my grandson is also 3 years old and cries, but once he turned 4, they won't cry as much. I only ask why. It's a mystery, children, isn't it? Guess that's definitely a darker blue. Okay, So this white, let's just take pure white. Another thing I think a lot about, you know, as I'm painting this Picasso, is I just think about how, like, he clearly plays, like he's playing with color, like he's having fun, just moving color around, trying one color here, seeing what it looks like. If he doesn't like it, then he paints over it, and he just. So as another artist, what I really admire about him is the freedom to experiment. There's no fear at all. Like, I mean, if he was a skydiver, he would be like the best skydiver. He would be one of those persons that jumps out of an airplane without a parachute and bounces off one of those trampolines, which is something you gotta watch. It's crazy and makes me ill watching it. Like, oh my goodness, those videos. How can anybody do that? Okay. I think I'm satisfied with the background. I want, like, if we just look at these, you'd see already, like, that blue is pretty dominant. It is possible that I'll decide it was too much and tone it down a little bit later on. I think that's done. You know, some of that line work, I think that will be stuff we'll do later on. So, it's time now to go back to the foreground and finish the foreground. So, what I want to do is, I'm probably going to go right to the face right now and start painting there. Let's do a quick little blow dry. So maybe let's finally zoom in here and start looking more closely at things. Okay, so we got a lot of color in this face. I think let's get a bit more white paint on the palette. I think that might be enough. And so, as I was talking earlier, that his face is very worked, like arguably overworked, where you can really see a lot of paint going on here, a lot of texture. Okay, and while this is still wet, I'm just going to take my cool yellow and just mix that a bit in here. Maybe just while we're doing this with this color, let's just take and paint it. So this is cool yellow with a bit of white in it. Otherwise this wouldn't show up really at all atop that purple. It would just disappear. And you know, it might be worth just taking a look at the hands too, since we can start building that up simultaneously. Now this yellow that he was using right here is a bit off. It's got a bit of gray in it, so it's a little bit muted. I'm just going to use mine at a little bit more higher strength. But if you're just wondering how to get that, I would probably put just a little bit of blue and a little bit of my black in there. Now let's go for a bit of a peachy color here. Well, actually, let's go for this kind of red, pinky color. Oops. Let's dive back down. It's a little bit more intense than I wanted, that pink. Could just add maybe a bit more white to it. How about in the hands here? I almost feel like this has got a bit of that pinky color. The other hand, not so much. That's a bit more blue, maybe a bit of... That's a bit intense. Okay. Let's go to just red now. Although, you know what? Maybe before I do that, I'm going to take this same color with a little bit of white, and I'm going to paint it in a few places where I know it would have a bit of trouble standing out on its own. So we'll paint this, and then afterwards we'll put... Oops, that's pretty big. Ah, it's okay. Yeah, that should be okay. So one thing, you know, if we paint this warm red over top of this blue, it's going to go dark, like as it did a few times. We can even use that deliberately as a kind of outlining to help us outline. I've done that in the past. Here I'm not going to do that, but it is kind of a fun little trick that we can do. Okay, so now I can put that red right there. And it's going to be nice and intense. And if I want, I can paint that purple over top and clean that up. I also did a little bit of that pink there. Okay, moving right along. I think I want to do a little bit more of this warm green. These were just a little too transparent for my liking. Bump that opacity up. Actually, I'll take a bit of that same color that I was just using, mix it a bit into this white and yellow. Gives me just a kind of ugly greenish kind of thing. A little. Let's get a bit of green and white. Looks like kind of the interior of these eyes are a bit greenish. Let's get some of the green in the stems up above here. Okay, Donna says, Michael, does it say anything about Picasso doing hallucinogenics? Because I can't see any other reasons for this face. I've never heard of Picasso, you know, experimenting with drugs. Not to say that he didn't, or he certainly would have had the opportunity in Paris at the turn of the last century. You know, one of the most famous or infamous substances people would consume was absinthe, which I've never had. I mean, I think absinthe is essentially like a very super strong alcohol that quote unquote gives you hallucinations, but I think you're just being poisoned, which I think that's what hallucinations are. So like, why, like, I can understand why you would say that. Like, you know, the only way that maybe some people would imagine you would be able to come to an image like this is by being under some type of influence. I think this is really more just Picasso, just the total and complete freedom of expression, just, you know, painting quickly and without any editing whatsoever. And like I said earlier, like a total sense of play, of abandonment, of judgment, and that's what is, I think, more likely the cause of this type of image. I know it seems like super weird and strange, and it certainly seemed that way to people at the time, but I think he was just very, very fearless and was more than content. And I think he knew that these types of images would get a reaction. You know, that people, it would, just as of today, like people are like, wow, that is weird and strange. And it's that strangeness and weirdness that kept him kind of in the public eye. And another great example would be Salvador Dali, or even Frida Kahlo. Like, I feel like, really cultivated their eccentric personalities as well as the eccentric quality of their artwork. And that was like a huge selling point. Like, people may not want to think of it that way, but art is a business. People, like, Picasso made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars while he was alive, and that pushing that envelope, continuing to shock people, was a big part of the art, right? I mean, that's when we talked about the neoclassical stuff, that portrait of Olga we did. last couple weeks ago that is much more normal, not cubist at all. Remember, he had invented cubism, and then he went to that phase of his work. That neoclassical period was seen by many as him kind of selling out. Like, he'd already done all this wild stuff, and now he's doing all this very conservative artwork. And I think that was just, again, him saying, like, oh, you find this shocking, I'm going to paint a normal painting, and that's going to be shocking, because, you know, it's like, you know, like a heavy metal band like Metallica, you know, playing all these big concerts, guitars, all aggressive, and then let's collaborate with an orchestra and make classical music versions of our songs. That is about as rebellious as you can go when your whole reputation is being, you know, like rebels, right? Like, you have to think of, like, what is the next step that would shock your audience if they're so used to a certain kinds of thing. So I think yeah, I think I mean, it's possible, but I've never read anything about that. Like, I think Picasso, for all the weirdness and wildness in his art, I think was also a very conservative person, right? He grew up in like a very devoutly Catholic Spain. His family was devoutly Christian. Even though he was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party, I think his ideas, like social, like, you know, his political ideas were very left-wing, but I think his attitudes on gender roles, for instance, were very conservative, super conservative, right? And so I just sort of get the feeling that, as you know, he was one of the, like, you know, it's not uncommon. There's lots of artists that one might think of as being like revolutionary who are conservative. Like, we talked about one of the members of the Ramones, that punk band whose portrait we painted a few weeks ago, was like staunch, like a pro-Reagan Republican, which for a punk band is just outrageous. And so it's like, does he really believe that, or is he going in that direction in order just to keep people on their toes? Like, for instance, Johnny Rotten, the head of the Sex Pistols or Public Image Limited, was a pro-Trump supporter, right? Which is just like craziness for a guy like that, who was like, you know, seen as sort of the icon of rebellion. But I think, again, that was, you know, rather than, like, that's again sort of part of like the marketing, trying to keep people like guessing as to what he's up to next. Anyway, long story short, let's get back to the painting. Interesting questions, though. Yeah, obviously. Let's I think, are we ready just to go into the face with black? I think we could start doing black almost everywhere here. So let's mix some black paint now. So we'll, where's the best place for this? I think we'll do it right up here. We'll put our cool blue and our warm red together. This purpley color. And then we'll pull it into the neutral core with this yellow. I think I put a bit too much yellow in there. Let's see if I put a bit of warm blue in here just to pull it back the other way. That's good. There we go. going to blow dry all of this because we got all this paint on here. No audio. Sorry. Anyway, I was just talking about Picasso being a bit of a dictator in his personal lives and personal relationships. Okay. Let's do a bit of purple up here. Out of purple, so I'm just going to mix it a little bit more. We don't need too much of it. So remember I said if I don't like how wide this red line is, I can kind of fix it with my purple as I'm doing right here. Okay, let's go to the black now. Now remember, this painting is like 15 times larger than this. This is a large painting, almost life-size. So, whereas this is, you know, much smaller than life-size. So just if you're getting frustrated with trying to get all these tiny details, it's okay. You can also use a Posca pen if you like, if you find that easier. I might just see if I can do most of this, if not all of it, with just the brush. I think I've done a lot of stuff recently with Posca pens, so it's nice just to take a break for if I can. Well, and then 2 minutes later, I'm like, yeah, let's get the Posca pen out. Maybe just while I'm right here, I'm going to use some red to paint. I don't know how this happened, but I got 4 of these instead of 3. So that's just the way it goes. Okay. So, how should we go about this, these hairs? I'm trying to think, how did I draw that? So I kind of like that, but I think I'm going to glaze over it once it's dry and just darken it so that this is a lot more subtle than it is currently. Again, this is a black that I've mixed. It's a little bit more transparent than the black that would come right out of the tube. Heidi says, I really like how loose or careless, quote-unquote, free this seems. I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. There's, as I said, like, Picasso, especially kind of from about this point forward, he's painting faster and looser every year. By the end of his career, he's basically painting almost like an abstract expressionist painter, which is ironic because a lot of the abstract expressionist painters began painting like this type of era of Picasso. So it's funny how like they come full circle, where he inspires all of these American artists like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko and Willem de Kooning, who are doing this sort of semi-cubist, surrealist type of painting in the 1930s and 40s. and then they become the new keepers of the throne, and Picasso is sort of cast a little bit into the dustbin of history. A lot of them pass away in the late 50s and 60s, like Rothko from suicide, Pollock from a drunken car accident, and so on and so forth. And so Picasso, ironically, outlives most of those men, because most of them are men. They're Elaine de Kooning and Joan. What? Just think of Shapiro. Joan. It's gonna drive me crazy. Anyway, well, Picasso sort of outlives most of them, and then kind of circles back and starts kind of painting in the style they were painting at before they went fully abstract. So, yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like, like the Beatles and Paul McCartney inspiring grunge music and like Nirvana, and then years later Paul McCartney playing music with the members of Nirvana after Kurt Cobain died, right? Like that. I think a lot of these like older artists, they get to a point where they want to see what the younger people are up to and collaborate with them, and so I think there's yeah, it is interesting how, as you say, loose this is. It just seems like a lot of fun. Like, I can imagine these paintings that he's doing, like, he's probably cranking one of these out every day, and they're leaving his studio and selling for what would be like millions of dollars in today's money, like right out of a studio, and he's making one every day. You know, it's like an assembly line car manufacturer, except his margins are very low. He's just him, and he just makes another one, and okay, there's another chateau for my grandchildren. Now we'll wait for this to, well, you know, I could, yeah, you know what, let's I'm just gonna use, maybe before this dries, here I've got like a pin, an anti-bullying pin. I'm going to use the scraper here to you know, and if you're not happy with any aspect of this, you just put a little more black paint back on. But you have to do that quickly while the paint is still wet. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get that. You won't be able to scrape paint away quite like that. Notice I'll have to paint that brown. Otherwise, that cat's just floating in space there. Oh, sorry, that wasn't on camera. And you know what? Maybe what I should do before I go any further is do more brown. So let's just take our warm red, warm red, warm yellow, and warm blue. Get that together. We need a darker brown here. And so if you're basically, to make a brown, you just make an orange, warm red and warm yellow, and add blue to it. And the more blue you put in there, the darker it's going to get. To a certain point, after a certain point, it's going to go kind of purple or green, depending on how much yellow and things are in there. But let's do, like, this is a very, very dark brown, but we need it, so we'll paint it in here. Okay, well, let's just take a second and just look at these paintings side by side. All right, that's where we're at this exact moment. Heidi says, Michael's cat has a more arched back, a bit tense. Heidi says, Joan Mitchell. Thank you, yes. Joan Mitchell was, yes, one of the great abstract expressionist painters who happened to be a woman. I think I did an episode on Joan Mitchell, too, like that was like a year and a half ago. I think that was the paint pouring episode. Maybe didn't turn out as well as I wanted on camera, but one of those ones I'll probably revisit here in the Master Study series, because I think that was one of the very end of the Intro to Acrylic painting courses that I did. Okay, I want to get this kind of brooch on her chest, I think. I think that's what this is. Let's get this painted in. Is there anything else like that that needs... Heidi says, Joe Mitchell's works are hard to follow and study. Interesting. I think I'm going to blow dry this because I can't remember exactly where I put paint. So that'll keep my hand wet or free from... Okay. Actually, I think let's continue down this left side with that hand. right? Like, so this looks, you know, it's both like a hand sitting on a, you know, the edge of like a hand rest on a chair. We also see sort of like the underside of her. It's like kind of like a, so that's an example of kind of cubism in action, like trying to paint, give us this three-dimensional quality that's not illusionism, like representational painting, but trying to go for a totally different way to communicate. So there's a little bit of blue that I'm gonna guess I have to put back in there. keep on going, just trudging down this painting. This little bit area could be a dark gray. If we want to do that. This isn't quite exactly what was there, but I'm just gonna riff around on So I was planning on just painting this black and then painting those circles purple over top of it. I still think I'm going to do that because it just will save me so much time. Same sort of thing there. Okay. Where are we? Right here. So because this black is a little bit transparent, when I paint over it, you can see a little bit of that purple through there. I love that. That makes me super happy because it just adds that little bit of complexity to the painting that, you know, if we just painted it black and tried to get it done as quickly as humanly possible, we wouldn't have those little nuances that I think make the painting what it is. Looks a little bit different there, doesn't it? That's okay. So my paint is starting to get a little bit sticky and less, it's you know, it's because I mixed it like an hour or more ago, right? So it's just sitting there slowly drying on the palette, and it'll become more and more difficult to use as this painting progresses. Good thing is that, you know, this black we have maybe another 40 minutes of it, and then we'll be done. Heidi says her hands look very witchy. Is that how he saw her? Good question. I mean, I was talking about that earlier. Like, even her hat and everything has like a bit kind of a witchiness to it. And I mean, I don't know. You know, the images of the witch that we have today, I don't know how long those have existed. I mean, obviously they burned witches at the stake in Salem. I've been to Salem, Massachusetts, and I went there mostly because that's where the birthplace of Jack Kerouac is. But in Salem, that's where the witch trials were in the 1600s, and it is very interesting place to visit. But I you know, the idea of like a woman wearing this sort of top or pointy hat and riding around on a broom, I'm not sure when that came about, if that's how recently that is. But yeah, I mean, I think probably there was an aspect, because she was probably the most powerful woman he had been with. I think there was probably he probably saw her in that line of like a kind of a threat, and probably went out of his way to demean her and make her feel as powerless as possible, and depict her in negative ways to put her down. As I said, not the most not a great guy. I talked about how he literally had encouraged his wife, Mary Therese, to fight with Dora Maar, like physically fight just for his pure pleasure. Which, if that's not enough to convince you of the kind of person he was, then I'm not really sure what else one could say, because I can't think of anything more horrible than that. But I also mentioned earlier too that he very infrequently painted, you know, from the model directly. Often he might have people come in and kind of sketch briefly, but for the most part he actually did majority of his paintings just him and his imagination. I'm sure he had lots of models coming by the studio, but whether they posed for him is a whole other thing. So again, I'm not really going out of my way to try to make these in the quote-unquote right places. I'm just putting them down as quickly as possible. Donna says, witchy hands and a black cat. It is pretty funny, yeah. All of the tropes of the witch are present in this painting. Oops, sorry, not on camera there. Okay, getting closer and closer here. So I think I'll paint her nails afterwards. I'll give it a little bit of white, maybe a bit of blue in there. Okay. Let's do those fingernails real quick. Actually, it kind of looks. Let's just get a bit of this blue, a little bit of black in there. Also just going to do this to these nails as well. Let's get a bit of white. Got some paint on the background there. Okay, let's just quickly clean that up. Surprised there's been more of that yet. Okay, you know, we're quick on the ball, it comes right off. Got lots of paint all over my hands, so that's why it's not at all surprised. Okay. Let's just take a look at these because we're getting close. So, let's get that purple back. Okay, now let's take some white and purple. Okay. I don't know, are those, these purple dots maybe a little bit bright? We can always just glaze over top of them, because I'm planning on still glazing over top of the hair. Okay. So I think we're at the time here where we're ready to do just the final few touches to wrap up this painting. So really, I just need to do a little bit here in her hair, maybe a bit of line, very light line work in the top part of the painting. But I'm pretty happy with the way this has turned out. I mean, a painting like this is pretty straightforward. As long as you're willing to put the time in, you'll get a pretty good result. So, we want an orange. Let's mix another gray. Still have some stripes to do up here. I have to blow dry before I kind of wander into that area. Oh yes, a little bit up here. It's a little bright there, isn't it? So again, this paint is really starting to kind of seize up, and it makes it a little bit kind of tricky to paint with. But it's also kind of, it works conceptually with this artwork. You could see the way that he's also painting at times with a dry brush, because he's going so quickly that he doesn't have time to get that brush, get more paint on the brush. He's just using whatever is left. Let's mix a green. So a very dark green. Because not all of these lines are with black. Okay. Just a little bit of black up here. The glaze. Okay, yes. Okay, so let's... I think this is the only... oh, no, did we use any glazing fluid? I don't think so. So we'll take some glazing fluid and our black paint. I guess it needs to be just a bit darker. Was I gonna do? I thought I was gonna do a glaze. Oh yeah, let's do just a little bit of a darker glaze over here. Darken these spots. So much easier that is than just trying to mix another color and paint that over there. I can darken that. And now I'm just going to get some glazing fluid on my gray here and make a very thin gray. This is going to be very transparent. Okay. I'll rotate that around. Almost done. Heidi says, Michael, yours looks livelier with brighter colors. Thanks, Heidi. Yeah, I mean, I definitely deliberately made that decision, you know, especially with these blues. I just felt like I had done a color that was very close to the original, but just felt like maybe it just needed a little bit more of a pop. else needs to be done here. Do I want to darken that hair more? I think I might leave my hair like that. I don't see any glaring problems. Just a little thing. I think this is supposed to be black down here. Okay. Let's wrap up. You know, it is remarkable that this painting was made in 1941 while the Nazis were occupying Paris. Pablo Picasso stayed there despite all the warnings to leave. Most of his friends had left Paris. Picasso stayed. Any other artists who did stay were either just shot on the spot or taken to concentration camps, and most of which never escaped. So, considering that this was made during the darkest time in modern French history, and this is sort of a document from a particularly just a horrible time in human history, and it is to the credit of Picasso, he knew that he was big enough, famous enough that he wasn't scared of Hitler. He probably also just had a big enough ego that he figured Hitler was too scared to touch Picasso, and it's true. That's goes to show how bizarre the world can be at times, right? Okay, so let's do a little side-by-side comparison. This one, I think, turned out pretty well, considering how relatively quickly to get this much done. Please consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, take a photograph of your artwork, join the Facebook group, upload yours to the Facebook group so that we can all celebrate and share in the glory of your creation. And if you want to support the channel with a small donation, as little as $1 with the super chat or sending an e-transfer over email, contact me through the Facebook group or my website for that information, and PayPal as well. Okay, so let's take a look. There's the original and the two paintings side by side. We obviously don't have nearly the same amount of texture that he created in his, but I think ultimately it turned out pretty well. How about, let's look, we'll zoom in. Let's go even closer. Okay, so as I said, like, you know, we could really kind of, you know, like one of the things I was thinking about doing is maybe using the slow dry medium in here so we could kind of get some of those colors smooshing and blending together. I don't mind that like that. I do, now that I'm looking at it up close, I think maybe we'll just do a little bit with a bit of blue. Oops. There's a little bit of texture coming in there. Okay, I think that's good. Yeah, that eye looks maybe like a little bit like an angry eye, where versus the originals maybe a little bit more hopeful. Let's look at that little cat there. I like how the cat turned out with the using the pin to scrape. I think actually that turned out really cool. But of course you have to do that really quickly. Let's just take a look at maybe some hands. Maybe just a... clean up there. Okay. Oops. Yeah, a lot of brighter colors. I could glaze to mute them a bit, but I like how that turned out. Go one more back to the end. And there we go. All right. Well, thank you everyone for painting along with this. I think this is a really fun Picasso. Again, it's not the most difficult one, but I think it looks really great, you know, when it's all done. We'll see you guys next week, and we'll be painting this painting, which I've already finished Okay? Even though I'll be on holiday, you will still get your regular fix. We'll see you guys then. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you all again very soon. Good night, everybody.